go over how to properly remove gel polish. Whether you're doing this at home, in the salon, wherever, a lot of people don't understand what goes into removing gel polish. They do it too quickly, or they just resort to peeling off their gel polish. And this is really how gel ruins your nails. I remember a long time ago, I found a picture of someone who had peeled off their gel polish and ruined their nails. And I posted this picture on my Instagram with this message, just because I wanted people to understand that really the product isn't what's ruining your nails, it's the process in which you are removing it. So today we're gonna go over the proper process to remove gel polish. Today we're gonna be using some foil wraps. You can also use aluminum foil with cotton balls or with gauze wipes if you don't have the kind of removal wraps that have the pad on them already. I really like the ones that are pre-made because it just saves me time. But if you're doing this at home, you can absolutely use just regular aluminum foil and some cotton balls. We're also going to be using a very gritty nail file, so I would recommend probably somewhere between 100 and 150 grit because we want to be able to get off some of the layers of gel polish before we put our wraps on. We're also going to use a buffer, a cuticle pusher, and acetone. So today we're going to remove the gel polish that I applied on Herman last time. I'm using a 120 grit nail file, and I'm going to go through the surface of every single nail and remove enough gel that I can expose the base coat through the color. If you barely file your gel polish, and of course it depends on the brand that you're using, but when you're using very high quality gel that doesn't have a lot of solvents in it, you do need to remove enough of the gel that the acetone is going to be able to penetrate. So I'm just going through, keeping the nail file moving. I'm not using a lot of pressure because I don't want to create heat or discomfort for my client, but I definitely do need to work through or break through that top coat and the first layer of color. This is really going to help the acetone penetrate down to the deeper layers of gel and lift everything off from the bottom up. Today I'm just doing it the most basic way. I'm going to get into how I really do it when I'm doing gel polish removal. I actually use a specialty bit with my e-file, but I wanted to show the most basic method first before we get into e-filing techniques. So again, I'm not using a lot of pressure. I have a very gritty nail file, so I don't need to use a lot of pressure. And I'm just going through and removing as much top coat and maybe the first coat of color if I can. Depending on the gel polish that you're using, if you're using a very thin gel polish or more of a hybrid, you're not going to need to file as much as what I'm doing here. And it also depends on how many coats of color and how thick your layers were when you applied it. I just go through all the nails and break that seal on the gel polish. You can also file the free edge if you want to. On shorter nails, I find that that's less of an issue. But if you do have some longer nail clients where you've done a great job of capping the free edge, you can also lightly file the free edge to break that seal, and it'll help release the product from the free edge of the nail. This gel has been on for almost a week. That's as long as Herman could handle it. And as you're filing, if you notice any gooey areas, sometimes that does happen even after long-term wear. Just keep an eye out for that because it'll tell you whether or not your lamp is curing properly during your appointments. Okay, so I'm going to take one of the pads with the aluminum foil. The pad is already attached to the aluminum foil, and my acetone pump, And I'm just going to completely wet the pad without having it dripping. And then I'm going to make sure that the free edge is going to be exposed to that pad as well as the nail. So I watch while I bend that over, and then I do the shorter side and then the longer side around, just like a little burrito, and give it a nice squeeze to tighten. You don't want the wraps to be too tight where they're uncomfortable or it's causing discomfort. And if your clients are very sensitive to the removal process, you can also add cuticle oil to their fingers before you put wraps on, and it'll help protect their skin from the drying effects of acetone. So again, make sure the whole pad is wet without it being soaking wet. Make sure the free edge is exposed to the acetone as well as the full surface of the nail. Wrap the short side and then wrap the long side and give it a little squeeze. The neater you are with your wrap application, the better the acetone will be able to work. One of the biggest issues during a removal is the evaporation of the acetone before we're able to get the gel off. So we want to make sure that the wraps are nice and snug without being uncomfortable, and that way the acetone is going to be able to work right on the gel. So I just go through all the nails in a methodical process to get all of them wrapped. And if you do have a thumb that is too big for the pad that's inside of your aluminum foil, cotton balls are a great thing for big toes or thumbs. I'm doing this in real time so you guys can see exactly how long it takes to do the full removal process. And I also wanted to do it in real time so that you can see what happens when the gel comes off really easily, and also on some fingers when it comes off really slowly. So you guys are going to get to see exactly what it looks like when we soak off the gel polish after it's been applied. And the longer the gel polish is on the nails, the more difficult it becomes to remove it. So keep that in mind when using primers, and depending on how long your client has gone between appointments, you're going to need extra time for the acetone to process. Now, during colder months of the year, or if your client has really cold hands, one thing that does help get the gel polish off a little bit quicker and a little bit more efficiently is to eliminate the risk of evaporation and also to keep the hands warm. So you can take a paraffin bag or any type of plastic bag and just snugly wrap it around the hand and tighten around the wrist to keep that acetone from evaporating, and it also helps to keep the hands warm. You can also utilize gloves, like the electric kind of gloves, the mitts that you use for paraffin. You can use a warm towel, or you can even sit on your hands in order to get the acetone to be a little bit faster acting. Okay, so we had these wraps on for about 7 minutes. I usually check every 7 minutes, 5 to 7 minutes, depending on the client, because I want to see what's happening. I don't want them to have the acetone on longer than needed. So what I do is I take my cuticle pusher and I just gently scrape on the top of the gel to see if it's ready to come off. This looks like it needs more time. So I'm going to file it just a little bit to break that seal, just filing on the product and not on the natural nail, so that I can expose more of that base coat and the acetone is going to be able to penetrate deeper into the gel. Again, this may be needed for certain gel polishes and not others, and also it depends on how thick your layers are when you applied it. So I file just on the color to get rid of some of that product, and then I can put the wraps back on. I go through and I check all the fingers one at a time. Some fingers, it comes off easier than others. Some fingers are more stubborn. And I do like to try and scrape off some of the product that has softened very gently without causing damage to the natural nail. So just let your cuticle pusher glide over the surface of the product and don't jab into the nail plate. Any parts that are stubborn, you can remove a little bit more with your nail file and then put the wraps back on. Just make sure when you put the wrap back on, you actually put this padded side on the surface of the nail instead of on the bottom, and give it a nice little squeeze. So again, going through all of the nails, very, very gently putting pressure on the gel in a parallel direction so that I'm not jabbing into the natural nail. And I'm going to show you up close so you can see the difference between natural nail and gel. So can you see this little white line, kind of this flaky whiteness on the nail? That's the base coat. And the rest of the nail plate, it just looks perfectly matte. There's no lines or anything on it. That's the nail plate right there. So this is all product in the center. And I want to be very cautious about where I file and pushing on the nail plate, especially because I don't want to pull and tug on the layers of the nail plate. So just very gently going back and forth with my cuticle pusher, and anything that's willing to come off, I can remove. If I tug too hard, I can end up making a mark or lifting up layers of the natural nail. This thumb is probably going to take longer because of how much gel we put on it when we were smoothing it out. So you can see that barely the top coat is softening. I've still got a lot of product on the nail, so I'll scrape off as much as I can, file a little bit more, and then I can put the wrap back on for extra processing time. Check in with your client often to make sure that they aren't feeling uncomfortable. Acetone can make the nails feel sensitive. And depending on the client, they may feel like a burning or tightening sensation. So just keep an eye on them and make sure you're also removing product in between putting the wraps back on so that the acetone is actually able to work and it's not just sitting on top of the nail or the skin. If the pad gets dried out, you can re-moisten it with some more acetone before putting it back on the finger. And the same process is what we use for hands and feet. So whether they're toes or fingers, this is exactly what you would do to remove soak-off gel polish. On this pinky, you can see it's lifting up a little bit more on its own. It's a little bit easier to remove. There's a little stubborn piece right here on the right-hand side, probably where the pad wasn't perfectly touching the nail. But everywhere else, the gel is coming off very, very easily. And so I just want to use my tool to gently glide over the surface of the nail and keep an eye on that so that I'm not pulling or tugging the product off of the nail plate. I'm going to make sure the pad is on the right side and just give it a little push on that one spot. You can see the gel polish actually pop up sometimes after you take the wraps off. And that's a good sign that the gel is ready to come off. So again, gliding over the product, taking off any of the little flakes that are ready to come off. But anything that is still well attached to the nail plate, I want to give it more time. So I'll remove a little bit more product and then put the wraps back on. This is really important for those of you that are removing your gel polish at home. If you tug at the product before it's ready to come off, you're going to end up damaging your nails. And that's really how you end up thinning out your nail plate, is you're taking off layers of your natural nail when you try to tug at the product. So let the acetone do the work, and you can see on this nail, the acetone really was able to get down there and eat away most of the gel polish. It's coming off really easily. And just gently going back and forth, removing all the way down to the base coat so I can see that natural nail again. I can use both ends of my cuticle pusher. Sometimes it's easier to use the scraper to get the stuff off the free edge. So I want to show you really quick what the nail plate should look like and where you can see some of the gel polish residue. So the nail plate shouldn't have any gouges in it, but you can see there's a little bit of base coat residue on certain areas of the nail. The rest of that is actually the nail plate. So you can see kind of this little white line in like a circular or whatever type of pattern, and the rest of it's going to be nail plate. It also helps to look at it from the side because then you can kind of see the product sitting on top of the nail, like right here on the corner. but I really want to maintain the integrity of the nail plate. So just be very careful about scraping, pulling, and tugging, because we don't want to damage our natural nails underneath our product. That's what the nail plate should look like after removal. It shouldn't have any layers peeled up or any white spots. So again, the fingers that I smoothed out with top coat and extra layers of color last time, they're going to take a little bit longer to remove. And if I had used a non-acid primer, this would even take a little bit longer because it's just such a sticky, well-adhered base coat. So again, just give it time, let the product do the work. And these thumbs are probably going to take the longest because of how much product I used last time. So I can use my cuticle pusher on the product. I want to be careful not to jab the finger. And then I can use my nail file to remove more of the product so that my acetone is able to reach down to the base coat and lift everything off. Because soak-off gel is porous, that's why we're able to remove it with acetone, because the acetone is able to get in between the little areas of gel and break down those bonds that created the gel polish when we cured it. So for thumbs, I do like to add a little bit more acetone to the wrap. And keep an eye also on your clients that they're not loosening their wraps as they're using their phone or moving around. Or if you're doing it at home, try and keep a snug, tight fit on the wraps. So now that I checked all of those fingers, I can go back to the original pinky finger. It's had extra time now. And you can see how much it just pops off the nail. That's really what we want to see when we take off our wraps, is that the gel is just popping off of the fingernail. Look how easy it is to remove it now that it's had enough time to process. And there's no damage to the natural nail other than a little bit of residue of base coat that's still on the natural nail plate. That's the huge difference between letting the acetone do its job and trying to remove it prematurely. When the acetone's able to work, it really should flake the gel polish off, sometimes in big flakes or chunks. And the rest of it's going to be very easy for you to remove. Look how easy I'm able to just push on the gel polish and it just pops right off. Now here, there's a little part that's still a little bit attached, and I can just use a teeny bit more pressure to get that off of the nail plate. And again, these thumbs are probably going to take the longest because of how much product is on there. So that's just a good thing to think about when you're applying your gel polishes. The thicker the nails are, the more coats you put on, the longer it's going to take for the acetone to soak everything off. And we're going to get into ways that you can do services that don't require soaking off the nails every 2 weeks. Because you can imagine that acetone is very drying. It actually doesn't damage the nails, but it can be very drying. But this process, even if I'm careful of scraping the natural nail, removing the gel polish, it is possible for me to cause some damage here. So rather than putting your skin and your nails through this process of soaking off your gel polish every 2 to 3 weeks, there are some other options for being able to maintain nice nails without having to do this all the time. We'll get into that later when we get into our e-filing lessons. So just with a couple extra minutes, you can see how easy it is for me to get off the rest of the gel polish. And with just some gentle pushing, I'm able to get all of the base coat and everything off of the natural nail. Very, very light pressure with my tools and a parallel direction to the nail plate. I don't want to jab into the nail plate. I just want to glide on the surface of the nail plate with my pusher very parallel. So I can do a little bit more here on the thumb, getting that top coat off and the first layers of color. Be very careful not to jab your client in the eponychium. We don't want to cause any damage to the matrix while we're trying to remove gel polish. I can file a little bit more just to expose more of that base coat. And then I can put the wrap on for just a teeny bit more time. But this is exactly what happens sometimes, is some fingers are more stubborn than others. Some nails you'll even feel the gel polish pop off and release underneath the wraps, but sometimes the gel needs a little bit more time, and that's very important for us to do that so we don't cause damage. So now I can see the base coat exposed. I can put the wrap back on, and this gel should come off with just a couple more minutes. So now I can proceed with kind of getting rid of any of the residue of the gel. You can do a full-on manicure, reshape all the nails, and prep them again. And now that these nails have had gel polish on them, you can see that they already have a nice matte finish. So we're not going to need to buff these nails again necessarily. We just need to make sure they're clean and dry and that there's no flakes that are going to prevent the gel from adhering to the nail plate. So keep that in mind. You don't need to be filing the surface of the nail every single time. The natural oils are no longer there on the surface. The natural nail has been under gel polish. And if there are a little bit of areas where you have some gel residue, I usually just buff it lightly because it's not going to cause problems as long as it's not lifting off of the nail plate. So with that buff, you can see there's a little bit of gel base coat residue. You can see kind of that white, almost milky look. That is actually base coat right there, and that is natural nail. Can you guys see the difference between the base coat and the natural nail? And just with a very, very light push, I'm able to remove that base coat residue. But again, you don't have to worry about getting everything off. We want to maintain the health of the natural nail, so be very, very careful getting the gel polish off of the nail plate. It's not going to do anything if we put gel polish back on, and just with a light buff, I can smooth everything out and reapply. I just go through extremely lightly with a buffer, and this helps me get off any residue and any flakes before I reapply my gel polish. I do like to use a manicure brush to scrub the nails, and I will usually put some gel cleanser on my brush with my pump. So I just pump on some gel cleanser onto my manicure brush. I can sanitize these manicure brushes as well between clients, which I love, and so they're reusable. And I can go through and just scrub the nails with the gel cleanser. This will help me remove any residue of gel, any flakes, anything that's in the nooks and crannies. And the acetone in the gel cleanser will help dehydrate the nail plate again, and the alcohol in it will help kill bacteria on the surface of the nail plate. So when we're gonna reapply and you need very minimal prep work or refiling, you can just cleanse the nails. They're gonna be perfect for reapplication, and you don't need to prep the surface of the nail plate again. That's it for now, guys. And remember, let the acetone do the work.